Hi guys, this is going to be a quick video tutorial to get you started on the computer in class. Once you get your computer assignment, you're going to go over to your computer and you'll notice there are logins for each period. So there's a login for period 1, period 2, etc. So what you want to do is you want to use the name of your period for your password. For example, if you are in period 3, your password is period 3. No spaces necessary. Okay, so go ahead and get logged into the computer. And you should have a screen that's similar to what you're seeing on my screen. But you shouldn't have any folders or icons up on the desktop. So if you have any on there, these I need for my computer, but this one I'm not using. So if you have any that are left over from students from other trimesters, you can go ahead and just drag it to the trash and throw it away. Okay, and you'll start with a nice clean desktop that way. So now you want to create your own personal folder. So what you want to do is go anywhere on your desktop and right click. And when you right click, you'll get this screen that will come up. And you want to go over to new folder. Now if your right click is not working, what you can do is you can control click. So hold the control button on your keyboard and then click, because Macs don't come with a right click default. You have to set that up in settings, and I can help you do that if you're interested in doing that later. But for now, just go ahead and hold the control button and then click, and that'll force a right click. Now when you do that, you may get a folder that looks like this, and notice it's got this light blue highlight, which means it's ready for me to type my name into it. But sometimes you'll do that and you'll get this, and it just will be named Untitled Folder, and you now need to rename that. Okay, so in order to get back to that light blue highlight so I'm able to rename it, I want to select the folder by clicking on it one time, and then I'm going to move my cursor right over the lettering of Untitled Folder and click one more time gently, and that will bring up that blue highlight. At that point, I can press delete or actually just start typing my name. Okay, and then click, and there's my folder with my name on it. All right, so that's easy enough. The next thing I want to show you is how to open Photoshop on default. Opening Photoshop on default's really useful because Photoshop is the type of program that if the last person who opened it moved things around, and then you open it, everything's going to be moved around. So if you want everything nice and neat in its place, then you can learn to open on default. So if you look down here on the dock, this is your Photoshop icon right here. And notice this little tiny black dot underneath it. Illustrator, which is this icon, does not have that. That means Illustrator is quit. It's shut down. But Photoshop is open. So we need to first close Photoshop in order to open it on default. And to do that, I'm just going to click and hold, and then I'm going to drag up to quit. And I'll wait for that little black dot to disappear. All right. So now I can open on default. And the way that you open on default is to hold on the keyboard Command, Option, Shift, and then click. And while this is opening, I'm still holding down Command, Option, Shift. Once this window comes up, delete the Adobe Photoshop settings file, then I can let go of the keys and I'm going to say yes. And when I do that, Photoshop will open on what we call default. All right, now since we're working in Adobe Photoshop CC, the first screen you'll see is going to be this prompt to either start a new file, open a file. You can say, well, I'm going to start a new file and I want it to be letter size 8.5 by 11. And it'll do that automatically. Okay, so that is one way to start a new file. Now, let's say that I'm going to go ahead and close this. And there's another way to open a new file, and that's to start a new file, and that's to go to File, New. Now this is more effective if you're working in an older Photoshop program. And you can then pick US Paper and say OK. All right, same thing, just a different way to do it. Okay, so now If this is your first time in Photoshop, which it most likely will be, then you can just start playing around in things. In the next few tutorials, you're going to learn more and more about this workspace and things that you can do in Photoshop. But for right now, let's look at some basic things. For example, right here is the paintbrush tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then I can come over here and I can start painting. Now notice it's painting in black. If I want to change that color, I come over here. These are my foreground colors and my background colors. So I'm going to click on the foreground color, which is currently black. And notice it's way down in this corner, and I can move it up here. And then I can also move this, drag it to wherever I want. All right, and then I'll be painting in a new foreground color. Okay, so that's just one thing that you can do in Photoshop. Now, let's say you wanted to work on a file from the internet, okay, an image that somebody else has already taken or created. So let's do a Google search for that. Okay, so I'm going to search, let's see. I think I'm going to search funny cat. I really am a dog person, but cats can be pretty funny, so we'll type in funny cat. All right, so a lot of funny cats here. So here's a trick that I want you to get used to doing. When you're doing a Google search, go over to where it says Tools, click on that, and then go over to Size and search large images. This doesn't always guarantee that you'll get a good resolution image, but it helps a lot. All right. So if you're searching just large images, you have a greater chance of getting a good resolution image. Okay, but these images are not high resolution images. They're little thumbnails of the actual image. I like this guy here, so I'm going to go ahead and click on him. Okay, so you'll notice here's this little thumbnail, and this is even a larger view of it, but that's still not this high resolution image, this 1533 pixels by 1026 pixels. In order to get that size, you have to hit View Image. All right, so now I have the high resolution image. So you should do that every time you're doing a Google search and using an image off the internet. All right, now a really easy, quick way to get this image into Photoshop is just to click and drag it to my Photoshop icon that's on my dock. And you'll notice it appeared in Photoshop. So here's up here on my tabs, you can see there's my original untitled document that I started, and here's my new image of my cat. All right. Okay. I'm going to show you the layers palette over here. You'll notice if we come over here to the right of the screen, this is your layers panel, and it's going to be really important. In fact, we'll have an entire tutorial just on the layers panel because it's so important. But for today, just to play around, I'm going to show you a little trick. So what I want you to do is go to New Layer, which is this icon right here, and click it. And you'll notice I have a new layer on my layers panel. And I'm going to be working on that new layer. Okay, so instead of painting directly on my image, which would be here, I'm going to paint on layer 1, which will be above this layer. Okay, so I want to pick, let's make him kind of a crazy, scary cat with these red pink eyes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to paint red over this guy's eyes. I'll just cover the whole thing here. Okay, but that doesn't look very good because that just looks like a fake, red blob over the eye. But what we can do is we can change the blending mode. So above this layer 1, if you go to the top of your layers panel, currently my blending mode is on normal, and I'm going to pull that down and I'm going to change that. I'm going to try multiply first because that's a popular one that usually works pretty well. And you can see what that did. What that did is, if I go back to my image, is you'll see it blended that color with the eye. So now it looks like the cat actually has a scary red eye. Another blending mode that is popular is overlay. Okay, I kind of like overlay better because then, it's just a little bit brighter. So it's working a little bit better for this image. And there are plenty of other blending modes that you can play with and just work with. So with overlay on, as I'm painting, you can see that instead of covering the eye, it actually just becomes a part of the eye. Okay, so that is just one fun thing that you can do in Photoshop. Now, another really important thing that you need to learn to do is you need to learn to save your file into that personal folder that you just created. And it's really important that you navigate to your personal folder. All right, so I'm going to go to File, Save As. And I want to go to the desktop because that's where my personal folder is. And there it is. Now, if you have this view, which is very limited, what you want to do is you just want to go to this little arrow and click it. Okay, and that'll expand that view, and when you go to desktop, it'll actually show you what's on the desktop. So I'm going to double click on that. So now I'm going into my folder, and I can change this name to whatever I want. So funny cat picture, whatever you want to call it. And notice it's a .psd. That's a Photoshop file. And the reason it's a .psd, it's saving like that in default, is because I added a layer. And Photoshop files always have layers. JPEGs do not have layers. So while this file started out as a JPEG, it ended up as a Photoshop file because of the new layer that I added. So I'm going to keep that a .psd and save. This will come up every time after you have opened in default. You can say don't show again, so you don't have to keep clicking on that. And now I can go ahead and close that, and I can save this one. Save as. Again, now I'm going straight to my folder because that's the last place I saved. And I'll call this my first Photoshop doc. Save and close that. All right, now when I get out of here, I'm going to open up my folder and just make sure that those things saved in here. And since they're .psd files, by the way, I can just double click on it and it'll open automatically in Photoshop. That's it for today.